to the community conversation on COVID-19. I'm Dr. Bryan Williams, president of McCall College and the moderator of this series. McCall College is a local specialized college offering meaningful education to students of all ages. The motto of the series is Local Voices Addressing Local Issues. And throughout the series, we've really had a wonderful gamut of people that have been authorities in their own particular field. And so I've been so pleased that the voices that you've been hearing have such expertise on the issues that we're dealing with. Our goal for the series is to encourage vaccine participation by those who are hesitant. There are about 10,000 Valley County residents. Approximately 3,000 of those will be hesitant to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Each one of those people hesitates for a wide variety of reasons. Our series has been attempting to answer those main points of concern that folks have about the vaccine and to use local trusted sources of information to help them on their quest for more information. The freedom from that concept we're calling herd immunity is a freedom that will be achieved only if we have the participation of the vaccine population. This is week 7 of our 7 conversations. Tonight, we'd like to do some wrap up of our series. And I'm pleased to have my wife and partner, Lynette, on the other side of the camera. And so, Lynette, welcome and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. A lot of you actually know me as Nettie Kaye. My husband calls me Lynette, but I have my own YouTube production, which is an art instructional production that I do on a weekly basis, primarily. And so I'm usually in front of the camera and producing my own show most of the time. This time around, I've been really enjoying all the conversations, but being behind the camera, and it's just been really a lot of fun to get to figure out a few different technologies and that sort of thing, and getting over some of the bumps of live production. Wow, it's been kind of a challenge, but it has been wonderful to go through each week with various different guests, and really, really enjoyable to learn new things. It's always been a wonderful thing to be part of McCall College as well, because I get to sit in on various different classes and learn new things all the time. So I would like for us to take a few moments to get to know our moderator a little bit. I know him, but I don't think you do as much. And so my husband is Dr. Bryan Williams, and I'd like for him to just kind of shed a little bit of light on what he does and what he knows. Okay, carry on.
Thank you. I have an undergraduate degree in biology from Northwest Nazarene University. And I then continued on to genetics. And what we've discovered is this vaccine is an awful lot of genetics.
Yes.
And so I studied genetics as a graduate student at the University of Oregon. And that's where I met you. I was a genetics student that got distracted by a gal and didn't finish his master's in genetics. And so off I went to then try and find employment that would be meaningful for our future. And I began working for a pharmaceutical company called SmithKline & French. And SmithKline & French are now known as GlaxoSmithKline. And GlaxoSmithKline are the largest producers of vaccines in the world.
Yeah.
And so they're a major player in the vaccine. But you'll notice you probably don't know their name, because they haven't, their COVID-19 trials never made it. And so they have vaccines in everything else, or in many other fields. My role the vaccine that I helped launch was a hepatitis B vaccine.
Right.
And so my job is then to take a brand new pharmaceutical and deliver it to the medical community, the pharmacists, and the support people all across the region that I would be working in. And so that was my first employment. And then I decided I wanted to do a little bit more. And so I went back to graduate school and asked Lynette if she would join me in Pasadena so that I could attend my master's program and then my doctorate. And I did my doctorate in bioethics, which asked the question, should we do something in biology? Is it ethical to do something? And so I enjoyed that kind of work. And then after that, I received a professorship and had the opportunity of teaching for over a decade in Portland. And then we came to McCall, and McCall, really the goal in my mind, and hopefully in the goal in our community's mind, is to build a college that's meaningful to our community. And so we're here today because McCall College is now over 10 years old. And we try and offer specialized education, of which this is that. Okay. And so we've enjoyed that. Now, our series of specialized education has been on to help the vaccine hesitant understand the vaccine a little bit better. And our first guest was Mike Weiss. And Dr. Mike Weiss is an epidemiologist. I'm wondering, Lynette, what do you remember about Dr. Weiss?
I thought he was one of the most fascinating people that we've come across. Well, everybody that has been part of this operation has been quite fascinating. But he was a very, very interesting person and had done work. Was it Peace Corps that he worked in, Brian? I'm trying to remember. He was like in Afghanistan and a few different places.
I think it was Albania.
Oh, Albania, that's right. Starts with an A. Okay. But yeah, he was, he did all kinds of incredible work with just different countries that you would never go, on holiday. And then just had such a good, wide variety of experience and could explain the whole disease process, the concept of what is a virus, and then also what are vaccines and the different kinds of vaccines that we were dealing with. So if you haven't watched that, we did that one for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks, and those conversations are up online and available to watch now. So you can go back and really learn something. Hello. And so one of the things that I was remembering, I think it may have been a few of them were so concerned with where people get their information. And do you remember him talking about that? It's like why he was so concerned about how people get information and where they were getting it online. That was primarily that. And so where are the various different places that we get information from, as far as the vaccine or any information for that matter in our community?
What we wanted to say and what Dr. Weiss said is to make sure you start with the CDC. The CDC is very, very readable. And so if you go on cdc.gov, you will find an awful lot of COVID-19 information. But I found not a lot of gobbledygook. They have done a really good job of trying to explain it so that the reading public has an opportunity of gleaning some information for it. Okay. So the CDC is an important source for them.
Yeah.
And what I enjoyed is he really walked us through the project of how you get a drug approved.
Oh, right.
Because this drug seems to have been approved terribly quickly.
Really fast.
And it was. And so he helped us to understand that there were some steps that they had to push through. And one of the steps that pharmaceutical companies, they have to go through 3 phases. And those 3 phases, they often stop after the second phase, because the third phase is really expensive. And the third phase is when you're going to have 30 or 40,000 people taking your product. And so a lot of them, once they get to phase 2, they realize, don't want to keep going here. It's not giving us good enough results in the labs and in the research side of it. We'll stop here. And they never get to phase 3. And so these vaccines have made it through phase 3. And so that was an important aspect that we want to make sure people understand. But they're not fully authorized. They're still experimental. And so that becomes the challenge. And he helped us to understand that, yes, they're experimental, but they've had large studies where they've had a chance to get some good data as to what's happening. And so that was an important part of what Dr. Weiss was helping us with. Do you remember some other things?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. There were, I was just remembering in the beginning, I think there was about 15 vaccines that they were working on to start with, probably even more. And right now, how many do we have? You know, in the United States, we have 3, right? And then Canada and Europe have AstraZeneca, which is very similar to, I think didn't he say it was similar to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Yeah.
And so that was it's just slightly different in the way it's made. So that was fascinating.
And so we may remember that the AstraZeneca was producing blood clots.
Yes.
And they halted it in Europe. And then Johnson & Johnson had a little bout of blood clots, and very little, but it was there. Right. It was 7 cases, which have now expanded to at least 13, but it's out of 7 million delivered doses. And so that's a very, very small percentage. So the good news is we know about it.
Yes.
And the key and the reason that they stopped the vaccine was so they could alert the doctors on how to treat this particular form of blood clots, which is a little different than your average blood clot that you'll see in an ER. And so once they felt that information was out there, they opened it up again. And so Dr. Weiss was really, really helpful on that. And that was followed up by our representative from Central District Health.
Right.
And her name was Gina Pinnell. And Gina Pinnell helped us to understand what public health is. What do you remember about Gina's conversation?
Wow. Yeah. She was a very, very bright gal. I was just trying to remember where was I? Okay. Gina, and she was just talking about how the information gets out to people and how they kind of process. Was it more on the mask mandates and all that kind of stuff?
She started a conversation on the mask.
Sure, and how they decided, what what to recommend as far as mask mandates and that sort of thing. And so it's been kind of one of those kind of interesting journeys, because we started out, without masks, and then we realized, well, I think we all knew that masks were important even before they said it, but they needed to kind of reinforce that masks were effective and were at one point our only tool. That was our only tool that we had to fight, other than what was the 3 things that they talked about? They talked about hand washing, they talked about social distancing, staying 6 feet away from people. So they made that decision of how far away is safe to be away from a person, and then also the importance of wearing masks, and then making those crazy decisions on whether to mandate them, and who gets to make that choice. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later on in talking about government. Yeah.
So she tried to help us with herd immunity. And she was the one that really got us there. And we've heard from many, many levels, Dr. Fauci, and at so many levels, that the number we're trying to achieve is 80% of the population needs to have herd immunity. And the rationale for that is if you're sick and you're exposing someone else to the virus, only 20% now of the people you'll communicate and contact with might get sick.
Right.
And so most of the people you work with or you talk to should be protected if you're at herd immunity. And herd immunity is achieved by either getting sick or getting a vaccine. That's pretty well the choices we have in this particular pandemic.
Right.
And so exposure to the virus, you get sick, or you get a vaccine. And that's where that number, so you have to have 80% of your population who have been sick or have received the vaccine.
Sure.
And then there's few enough people that you really won't cause it to go from one to another, to another, to another, to another. It'll stop. It won't find a
Because
host.
there's no host, right?
There's no one there that it can
you
infect
can connect to.
if you can achieve 80%.
Right.
So I think you did some reading today. Where are we in Valley County?
So in Valley County, according to our newspaper, we are at 53%. So our numbers are going down as far as how many people are getting sick. I think we even went a couple of weeks there for a while where we didn't have any reported cases. I'm not exactly sure. And thankfully, our deaths have been extremely low. I think we're very, very fortunate, especially in McCall, that we have, we have to kind of work a little bit under a different set of, I don't want to call them rules, but guidelines, because we are we are a place where people come from out of town a lot. And so we're not a typical rural town. We are very much, we have a lot of cross-pollination, if you might say, with people coming in for skiing and swimming and boating. And this is where they come because they've been isolated for a long time. So we're at a much higher risk. And so the fact that we still in McCall have to have a mask mandate, well, we need that because of the cross-pollination of people. And so we have a little bit different set of guidelines than we do in say the rural part of our county.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And so Gina helped us with the herd immunity
Mm-hmm.
concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a great contribution to her,
Yeah.
because so we're at 53, we need to get to 80. So if you sort of understand what's happening in our county, the first 50% is pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
People ran at the vaccine.
Yeah.
The dilemma is we know that about 20% of people are not going to get the vaccine at all.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not. And I'm sure many of the people in the audience know people in their world that don't get the vaccine. We know some in our own immediate family
Exactly.
are not going to get it doesn't matter what we say. They're not getting it. And in our region, that's about 20%. It's a fairly high number. And so usually in most areas, it's 10 to 20%, but ours seems to be closest to 20. So that 30% we called the hesitant. Now, some can't get the vaccine.
Right.
Our
Mm-hmm.
children.
Mm-hmm.
Our children right now, under 16, cannot get the vaccine. And that's, my goodness, that's got to be 15% of our population.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we get approval from the CDC to vaccinate the children, and they're not approved yet, even for the experimental, there's no approval for under 16. And my memory is only the Pfizer vaccine is approved for 16 to 18. That's my sense. So we really, right now, we only got one
Mm-hmm.
for 16 and 17-year-olds. And please review the CDC guidelines if that's a concern of yours. So if we get our children done, now we're at 65%. Does everyone now understand why the hesitancy community is so important to us?
Right.
For us to get from 65 to 80 takes the hesitant group. And so if you're hesitant, you're really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we as a community need for you to really work through this issue so that we can all be safe. And that's the point of talking about herd immunity. And we're in the tough phase now. It's the children and the vaccine hesitancy community that are the next wave of vaccines. And it's hard work.
Yeah.
But we're glad we're here to talk about it. We're glad you're there to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we enjoy.
Yeah, I would like to know, just as we think about it, what might be some of the reasons that people would be hesitant to get a vaccine, you know?
Yeah, our community has received that question for each one of them. Each
Right.
one of our guests
Mhm.
has tried to understand that. And so that's something that it is an interesting part of each one of their conversations. And so our epidemiologist worked on that. Gina worked on that.
Mhm.
Our next, and I'm going to defer that for just a minute. I'd like to sort of get into that topic in a
Okay.
little different
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But I'd like to go to our next speaker because that was a very valuable voice in our community. And it was our pharmacist, Kevin Ellis.
Yes.
And if Kevin is, if there's anything Kevin is known for, it's having people's confidence
Sure.
that they ask him questions. And you can watch him all day long and you'll see folks just more than happy to ask him questions and confident that he gives great answers. And so Kevin then led us through the vaccines and the vaccination process.
Mhm.
What do you remember about Kevin?
I was remembering that he was talking about how much the incredible load that he had to take on when it came to adding vaccinations, and the fact that when he began, and he just got out of pharmacy school and came right to McCall. I loved his stories, and how he they didn't do vaccinations. The pharmacists did not do vaccinations when they first started. They just did medications, that sort of thing, and answering questions and, pill counting and that sort of thing. And then eventually they started using the pharmacy people to do vaccinations. And so that was something that he had to learn early on to do vaccination. So when we do this big, huge vaccine clinic, their work really doubled up. And it's been very challenging for them, but also I think they they really, really are feeling as though they're doing something seriously important. And every single arm, just gets us a little bit closer to our herd immunity. So, and he was one that was really very concerned about where people got their information. That was a huge deal. It's like, if you get it from the gossip train, that was what he was worried about, was that one person tells another person, and our friendships can really mess with how we make our decisions, and also the social groups that we are attached to, how our social, it really is all interconnected, whether we have certain political or religious groups, or if we, are in a rock collecting place, or, if we're artists or whatever groups that we're in, often will sway the way we think when it comes to certain things that we're not really sure of. And we'll tend to all think, move the way we think in the direction of our social groups. So that's just kind of a challenge in order to get the actual truth out about various different things. When we tend to have a bias according to the groups that we are associated with.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in isolation and relying on whatever we watch on YouTube, we can really have a distorted view of things. And so that was his main concern, was making sure that we do, don't get too swayed away from the people that are actual experts.
What I enjoyed about Kevin's conversation was his information on messenger RNA.
Yes. Yeah.
Because this has been a real concern. Now,
Mhm.
begin filling in your question. What are some of the reasons people are hesitant about the vaccine? And many of them are hesitant because they know it's new technology.
Right.
They remember that when they were a child, they might have heard of a vaccine that used a little bit of live material in there, and everybody got a little bit sick. And they knew about that. They know that there's a little bit of dead material in a vaccine, and you got your immunity by being exposed to a little bit of dead material. There was the Johnson and Johnson mechanism, which is delivering to the cell a little bit of the material, and it has to go through the cellular pathway to build a protein that is then which the body then reacts to, and you're protected as a result of that. But this messenger RNA was new to a lot of people. And so an awful lot of the questions I catch in the various places that I'm dealing with people is about messenger RNA. What is it?
What is it?
And the uniqueness of messenger RNA is that it is the product. It's a very natural product. When your DNA divides, it divides and produces messenger RNA, which then exits the cell, and is then and then the proteins that we need for everything in our body is messenger RNA being turned into a protein. Now, what the protein that the messenger RNA is offering us is the spike on the virus. And so the companies, Moderna and Pfizer, were able to package up messenger RNA, protect it, deliver it to the body, and the cells immediately receive the messenger RNA. So it bypassed the DNA part of that replication process. And so it delivered the messenger RNA that's very natural in your body, and the messenger RNA then produced the spike protein, and your body reacted to that spike protein. And when you actually get the virus with its spike all around that ball, it's ready to go and it can defend you from that protein. And so it's a wonderfully natural product. And it's one of the reasons why the side effect profile seems to be so low for these particular products as compared to other kinds of vaccines.
Right.
It's just a simpler pathway to achieve that result. And so Kevin was wonderful at laying out the messenger RNA and making sure that we understood that pathway to the best that we can as just normal people, trying to understand what's happening in our bodies. And so that was really helpful for me. And Kevin was wonderful. Was there anything else that you remember about Kevin that came to mind?
I think that was really the most important. And, you know, I've watched so many doctors talking about this and scientists, and it takes quite a few times to try to get that thing to sink in as to what it really is that we're looking at. So it's really more, so, you know, our bodies kind of, it's almost like it gives us a dry run or a practice run in our system to kind of be able to identify. That's why I think the word messenger, so it kind of, it refers to, it just sends the message that this is what it looks like, watch out for this guy, and then it will help us to defend ourselves so that we don't have to get sick in order for us to have that information in our systems. Right. It doesn't change who we are. That was another thing. It's like, does it really mess with our DNA? Does it change, you know, am I going to grow a third arm? No, it doesn't change who we are as a person as far as our DNA. And I think some people are just really scared of that. It's like, that's been some of the information. And it's like, oh my goodness, you know, we're going to end up different people and we're not going to have our normal DNA. No, that's not what's going on. And that was really,
it bypasses the nucleus altogether.
Yeah.
And so the nucleus holds your DNA. And so there's no involvement with introduced messenger RNA with the nucleus. It does last about 10 hours in your body. That's why you sense those side effects.
Right.
Now, another way of thinking of side effects is you're earning your immunity.
Right.
Okay. Yes, there's side effects, but you need the side effects so that your body is really informing you that it's doing its job.
Sure.
And for those that haven't had any side effects when they received their vaccines, that's great.
Yeah.
But for most of us, we had a bout of side effects. And that was one of the other things that Kevin sort of cued us on, is some of the problems that people were talking about
Right.
as a result of the vaccine. And for many, it's weakness. For many, it's a sore arm. For many, it's lassitude or just inability to have any energy whatsoever. And that was my problem. I had sweats through the night and chills. And then I was just weak for a day, and 12 hours to be precise.
Sure.
And so it was a challenge for me. But those side effects are part of your body saying there's a foreign substance in here, and we're throwing everything we can at understanding it and then protecting you from that foreign substance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the body reacts with any foreign substance that enters into the body.
Sure. So Kevin also mentioned that we said, oh, isn't this is earning our immunity? And he said, but I don't want people to think that if they don't have any side effects, because a lot of people, maybe 3 out of 4 people don't. He said that their vaccine's not going to work. They might just have a different way of responding to the vaccine, and so it doesn't mean that you're not going to have, you're not going to have the immunity just because you didn't have any side effects. Be glad if you didn't have any side effects, but if you did, you'll know that this is just an indicator that your body now knows how to fight. It's like getting a pre-workout on this, and it's not a long time thing. I think in our next video, next session, we talked about the what happens when you get sick, and you may with your vaccine get a couple of maybe a day's worth of side effects, but in comparison to what we heard during our stories of COVID-19 from people who have had COVID. We had how many? 5 people that joined us that day? 5.
Yeah.
And then strangely enough, our following week with our county commissioner, he said he was one that had gotten really, really, really sick with COVID and still is having issues. But those symptoms and just the amount of suffering, good night, that they went through and are still going through, even if they had it in November, there's still, some of them are what's called long haulers. Okay. So you get a vaccine, and then what happens? Maybe you have some side effects from your vaccine that last for a day, maybe even 2 days. Okay. Or you get COVID and you have problems for the rest of your life. Some of them. I think every single one on our panel are still having issues with everything from brain fog to lung issues to, it was just really shocking. I don't know why it shocked me, because people talk about it all the time on the news, but wow, having your friends or family members that have gone through it, it sure really, really kind of confirmed how important this really is. It just is. So we had 12 family members that got sick, and it's not good. It's not good. So not good at all.
Well, we all heard national stories. We're now seeing the horrific stories coming out of India. But when we see our own friends and neighbors who get sick, it's a very meaningful experience for all of us. And I was deeply saddened at how some of them had really struggled with the disease. But I was very thankful. I think all of them were either had already gotten their vaccine or were going to get it. Mm-hmm. I think they were past that hesitancy point.
Sure.
They were willing to do it, and they were willing to invite others to get it as well. And so I was very appreciative. I found that very powerful to have people explain to us what you're avoiding if you get the vaccine before you get sick. Certainly you can get it after you get sick, but to get it before you get sick is such an advantage, and you can minimize. And we've been very, very worried about the blood clotting And yet blood clotting is a very serious side effect of COVID itself.
COVID-19, yes.
And so the incidence of blood clotting is much higher
very much so.
than 1 out of a million, which is
Right.
the incidence we're dealing
Yeah.
with the vaccine.
Well, and they also, the scientists are saying that the blood clots are happening in younger people in their 30s and 40s, and not, you have them all over the place. But that's been the big shock, is that, wow, the brain fog and the blood clotting has been happening in the younger population. And so that's been a bit of a shocker, and they don't, they just are not sure exactly why that's happening. But if you decide you would rather have the disease, oh boy, that's not what I would choose personally. So
well, these are typically very healthy people,
right,
and they've spent their lives recognizing they've had diseases all their lives, and your body is well tuned to handle those diseases, but it needs an exposure.
Sure.
And this one seems to give people a little more struggle when they're exposed to the disease for the first time. And so I appreciate people are making their choices. And so listening to people who, in the majority of cases, would have considered themselves pretty healthy.
Right.
And boy, did they struggle.
And
so that's a challenge for those that are healthy now, thinking their body can handle it if they don't get the vaccine. That's a serious risk. And so our last person that we had an opportunity of talking with was a commissioner of Valley County here in Idaho, who had the role of guiding us as a government leader, and that was Commissioner Hasbro. And Commissioner Hasbro had such an incredible burden to bear. He has been walking with this problem in our county from before we probably knew about it. He has been monitoring it, and he's a rancher, and so dealing with ranch issues, dealing with sickness and disease and life and death that are typical to any rancher. And so there's certainly that exposure and a family exposure. But he so impressed me with how much work he has done to get to know this disease, get to know what's happening, make sure he surrounded himself with capable people that can give him good advice. And so that was what was so impressive to me, was the hard work he's been putting in to understand it and then make good decisions. So what do you remember about Commissioner Hasbro?
Well, he's a very well-balanced guy. And I think the one thing that was so hard for him in the beginning was having to make that initial mask mandate decision. And he said people just didn't understand at that point. It was at the beginning of the pandemic, and having, we had the whole lockdown thing, and then we had the mask mandate that had to happen. But he said most of the time he will listen to his constituents and the people in the community, and try to really weigh things out as far as how what the community wants. Okay. But in the very beginning, he realized he did not have time. He did not have the time to mess around with this because there was a serious threat. And so he had to make a tough choice. And, he got letters and he got harassed. And you just don't do this to become a popular rock star. He said, this is one thing. He says, I'm not doing this. I love this part. He said, I'm not doing this job so I can get a really good seat in a restaurant. I think that might have been before we turned the camera on. He talked about that. But he said, this is not why I do this. It's not to become a popular person to where I can get a good seat in a restaurant. You want to be helpful and make sure that the community is running smoothly. And also, in this case, he said, when he became commissioner, he did not, a lot of people just didn't sign up. I think about the governor, he didn't even sign up for this. Nobody knew that we were going to have a pandemic in the middle. You think, oh, we'll just come in and we'll govern and we'll make laws and do different things. And all of a sudden, all HE double toothpick breaks loose with a pandemic, and we all have to adjust. And so the fact that he was able to make some tough decisions, and now he has to make more decisions. At some point, we've got vaccines on board, and then at what point do we kind of let up on some of the restrictions? And for some, it's too early, and for some, it's not early enough. And so you're never going to be right with 100% of the people, and that's hard. That's hard. Yeah.
So I appreciate Commissioner Hasbro and his honesty, and it was tough to bring the masks down. And he
Yes.
talked about that challenge because people recognize that the masks are life protecting.
They are.
And so when you bring the mask down, you create more risk for people.
Right.
And so then he had to endure it again
Right.
when people weren't happy with him with that decision.
That's right.
And it continues to this day here in our community,
Right.
as our community, McCall, has reinstituted the mask mandate, and we're watching what happens. So government is very difficult,
Yeah,
and it was a great joy to enjoy how he thought through
Sure.
the mask mandate. And so we've had some wonderful people. Yeah. And so as I think about what to recommend to people now, I think I would like to recommend to those of you that have been vaccinated, I'd like for you to be comfortable in how to handle conversations with those who aren't vaccinated but are hesitant. And so there's a few things I'd like to sort of use as a conversation point now as to vaccine hesitancy. The numbers of those who are hesitant is shrinking, and we'd like to be a part of helping folks. And the first thing I'd like to recommend for you is that you give people safe space to have quality conversations, and you listen to their concerns.
Right.
Safe space and listening is crucial. And so most of the folks that are dealing with it have different reasons, but a lot of them is they're just uncomfortable with making the decision right now for lots of reasons. For some, it's fear, and fear is normal. If you don't know something about what people are suggesting you do, fear is a normal result, and it slows us down or moves us away from things that we need to move away from. And so know that that's a normal reaction, and we've got to develop the information sources so that we won't be fearful about what is an option for us. For some, they haven't had time to talk to their physician, and they just need more time to allow them to have that conversation or with people they would like. And what we really need to make sure people have is a safe place with adequate time to have a reasonable conversation. And that's hard work in our busy lives. And so I'd encourage each of us to make sure that we are aware of that need of people and create the safe space, create a listening attitude, and create a valuable conversation that works through the information. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about always how you have responded to people in such a wonderful way in asking good questions. And something that I've learned from you over the last 40 years, yay, anyway, is to say, rather than preaching is meaning I'm going to tell you what I think, and I think you should do it this way, is to ask good questions and to ask somebody what it is that you are most concerned about, and then listen. And say, okay, what are you concerned about? What's your biggest concern when it comes to the vaccine? And then be ready to kind of respond to it with your knowledge. If you have knowledge about things, then you have something to share about it as well. And some people are not going to be open to it. That's okay. We have our own family members that are just not going to be doing it. And there's nothing that we can say that is going to change their minds. But maybe we need to ask, well, what's bothering you about it? My own father has got serious problems with blood clots, and there's no way that he is able to take the vaccine because he's had massive strokes and he's just not going to be able to take that. And I understand that, and I certainly would never push him at all in any way, shape, or form to do that because it's probably not safe for him. And then others that are healthier are just adamant because of their political or socio, just their people that they tend to congregate with. They think in a similar way, and so we need to find out why. Maybe we don't need to find out, but we need to ask good questions and say, share with me what it is that's bothering you about it, and maybe we can figure out some sort of a compromise in the middle.
That's so important.
Yeah.
And so the next thing to be reflective on is prepare for a good conversation.
Yes.
It takes hard work to be ready for a conversation that you've probably never had in your life. You might tell somebody what you do for a common cold, but you don't typically have conversations that are this meaningful for people. Right. So prepare by reading the best sources you can find. And the CDC in this topic is excellent. WebMD is a great source. Mayo Clinic, any clinic that you really know about, that might be a place to check out their information.
Sure.
Who has a reputation for quality data. And so be confident.
Yes.
The vaccines have had a tremendously good track record. Millions of people have taken the vaccine, and we would know about it if there were more problems. And so be confident the conversation is important, but be confident also that you've gotten good data.
So there's more people now you were saying 30,000 people, 30 to 40,000 people would be on a trial for any various drugs, vaccines, any kind of injections, that sort of thing. That's a lot more than 30,000 people have had the vaccines. And so this is a huge thing, really. I mean, it's so much bigger than any normal thing that I can really think about, So
that's important. And very few drugs get to the level of usage that we've already got with these vaccines.
Right.
And so that confidence is well placed if you were to have a meaningful conversation with someone.
I know this sounds a little bit silly, but the other thing that when you're trying to convince somebody of something, be kind and considerate. We just, you're just not going to get anywhere unless you are. It's a strange thing. It's not scientific, but it's just be loving, be kind when you do communicate with somebody, especially family members. Oh my goodness, and then if you do disagree, just say, I love you, but we disagree, and it doesn't mean that I love you any less. So anyway, that's just my little Dr. Phil moment here.
It's also important that if you're going to speak to someone about vaccine hesitancy, that you understand their social circles.
Yes.
Who's a part of their community.
Mm-hmm.
And often we might know their family and those parts of it, but it's really, do they attend church? And do most of the people in the church that they attend, are they vaccine hesitant? And you can see, do they attend a community service club? And how would that community service club react to vaccines?
Sure.
They may be a member of 4-H, and how many people in their 4-H community would typically be vaccinated? So if you can understand their social circles, the more people around a person that gets vaccinated, the higher the opportunity is, and the conversations that flow in every social circle to allow people to have more information. And the more people around them that are getting vaccinated will increase the likelihood that they get vaccinated. But if they're in a community, and we've heard about some of the communities that seem to have a high proportion of anti-vaccination thinking in their midst. And if they're a part of that community, they're likely to be getting most of their information from that community.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we've all seen this the data. But it's important that you understand the social circles that a person is.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are great questions to ask. What are those in your community thinking about the vaccine? And let them tell you what they're thinking
and why. So yeah, that's a really good point. So the other thing that has been kind of weighing heavy on my mind, we don't, because I don't know whether it's we're in a more of a rural setting here where we are not packed in like they are in India. And your heart is heavy when you see what's going on in India. And I think about they absolutely crashed the website this week for appointments for vaccines in India. It just got boom, because, you just put yourself in their position where there's not enough, I don't even want to say this. They are asking families to bury their own relatives in their backyard. Okay. If we were doing that here, we have the luxury of living in an area where we've got space and we can all go find our space, and we don't have to be packed in and exposed to every little thing. But if we, as people in rural America, were asked to bury our own family members in our backyards, I think we would think a little bit more seriously about getting a vaccine. We'd be lining up and we wouldn't even hesitate at all. And that's what's happening there, is that it's panic time right now, where they know what's ahead if they don't get a vaccine. And so, we're kind of spoiled in this country. Mm-hmm. We have the option. A lot of the people in the world do not have the option of getting a vaccine, and they are still having to bury their relatives. And so that's just it's a heavy thought, really. It really is. So the other question I want to put out there and is to say, okay, if you're not doing a vaccine and you're an anti-masker or whatever you are, what are you doing? We've been a country of people who appreciate responsibility and duty when it comes to protecting ourselves and others. What are you doing? Each individual person, what are you doing to help in this cause, in attempting to fight this battle that we're all fighting? There's got to be something, okay? Whether that means wearing a mask, getting a vaccine, staying isolated, not getting too close to people, washing your hands, all these different things that we're all learning together. But ask yourself what you're doing, what you can do.
What you're encouraging people to do is so important. I think what they need to first do is ask the question, what has your community done for you? Mm-hmm. And most of us would say, my goodness, they've given me my schooling. Mm-hmm. They've given me my roads to drive on. They've given me the tools that make life enjoyable. In our setting, we get wonderful recreation, that our community has built us wonderful beaches that we can enjoy. They've given us a place where all of our friends can congregate and we can share in community. Our community has given us an awful lot. I think the question you're trying to ask is, what are you going to give back to your community?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And right now, you can give back something.
Right.
You can give back protection so that you don't infect someone else.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's a way of thinking of community.
Right.
And we live in an area where the individual is king. Every individual in the state of Idaho, you would think, yes, has been crowned king, and they get to live in their own little kingdom and live life just the way they want.
Right.
Well, that goes for a long ways until we get into tragic situation where there's people who are sick all around us, and you have the chance of either getting sick or getting a vaccine. And the reason you get a vaccine, we've been talking about an awful lot tonight about how it's for you, it's for you, it's for you.
Right.
It's for other people
It's
too.
for other people.
And if your community is a great community, and I bet for most of you it is, this is something you give back.
Sure.
But it talks about that next step that I want people to be reflective of. As you're trying to get people to think about something that's important, tell stories.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Tell stories. What's it been like for you to be vaccinated? Because they might be afraid of the whole vaccination. They might be afraid of needles.
Right. Right.
There's an awful lot of people I've met in my life that are afraid of needles. Well, you tell them a story about how much pain you had with the needle. Or you tell them a story about what your side effects were. We've already talked about that, how much immunity you've earned. You might tell them a story about people around you that have gotten sick. You might do anything we've tried to do as a community here to tell stories, because that's the most effective way for people just to listen and not be threatened, because stories, and if they're real and true from your perspective, they're real and true from their perspective. And those stories are important. So we need to tell stories so that people understand what's happening around.
So when you think about when we fight battles together, I'm thinking about World War II and how the reason we fight, is to protect ourselves and to protect others. But individuals don't fight the entire battle by themselves. It takes everyone, and I think about how my grandmother grew a victory garden, back then. They did all sorts of things. Everybody got involved in the effort to battle the enemy, and to try to quell things down a little bit. Everything from Rosie the Riveter to victory gardens to everything. So everybody did their part. If one person was asked to fight the war all by themselves, well, it would just be overwhelming. But because we are all working together, it's kind of we need to look at it as though we have a sense of duty for the survival of the planet, for the whole world. And we are the ones, we are each individually coming together with other people in order to fight this battle. And so it's how much are we willing to be involved rather than just to isolate ourselves and hope it all blows over, Yeah, you can do that if you want, or you can participate in the battle.
Thank you. The last thing I'd invite people, and the question that I'd like you to ask is, can they use a computer to make an appointment? There is a tremendous number of people in our community that can't.
Yeah, right.
Use a computer or a smartphone or anything that is necessary in our community to get a vaccine. Now, I know that they've had some drive-up clinics, and certainly they could find out about a drive-up clinic, and hopefully those are in the paper. But for an awful lot of them, that might be a serious stumbling block for them, is they don't know how to get an appointment. Right. So would you ask people, do you know how to make an appointment for a vaccine? That might be the key element for an awful lot of our people that are struggling to get a vaccine. Sure. So I hope that answers your sort of wondering about what are the questions people ask. Have we sort of succeeded there?
Yeah. So that means you ask a person who hasn't been vaccinated, do you know how to get an appointment?
Yeah.
That's a good.
Is there anything else that in all these conversations that you're just remembering now that you'd just like to make sure we review?
I think we have covered a lot of things, haven't we? We really have. I'm hoping then when we begin again in our next round of conversations, we're going to be talking about something else that's part of our experience with COVID-19. And Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we close off?
I think I will. And thank you first for participating with us as we just rethink some 6 hours worth of conversations that we have participated in for those who are hesitant to get their vaccine. We so appreciate each and every one of you that have participated with us. And thank you, Lynette, for allowing us to have this conversation tonight. I appreciate your memory. And I trust all of you that have seen some or all of the conversations will have other memories that are helpful to you in this conversation. We would like for you to invite you to come back next week. But let me, before I say that, you need to know how to have access on those other 6 lectures. And so for access to the other lectures, would you go to YouTube /McCall College, all one word. And there you'll find all 6, and eventually this conversation will be up, and we'll finish our series with the 7 conversations. And you can go through each and every one of them, and I strongly encourage you to do that. And that's at youtube.com/McCall College, all one word. And you can access each of the conversations and be able to hopefully glean some additional information. But next week, we're continuing in our conversation about the pandemic, but this time we're going to be talking about mental health. And I think if we're all honest, the last year and a half of this pandemic has affected all of us in some way, shape, or form about our mental health. And so we're going to be having a 4-week series in May at 7 p.m. right here on Thursday nights. And the conversation will be on what the pandemic mental health story is in a rural resort area like ours. Our goal for the conversation is to offer education on mental health problems in our area, strategies for coping with mental health problems, and local and regional resources for help. We've got a great lineup of folks that will help. Central District Health is coming back, and they'll be our first speakers of this series. And there will be 2 of their team members will help us to understand our area and our region better and orient us into the entire conversation. And then we've asked some counselors to come in. Katie Stoll will be our first counselor, and her interest is in relationships. And I'm sure all of us will know that our relationships have been stressed over the last year and a half. How can we find that normal that we're hoping and longing for in our relationships? And then we'll have some conversations with some local counselors who are involved in various areas of our particular community. And that'll be week 3. We'll be having 2 folks here for that. And our 4th week, we've invited a brand new organization called ROC, and that means Recovery Oriented Community. And they partner up with YAC, our Youth Advisory Coalition. And we're hoping for some members of either or both of those organizations to join us and talk about some of the new communities that are forming up to help you as you recover and as you deal with our young people. And so we think we've got some wonderful opportunities to share with you some wonderful resources and to be aware of some of the problems. So remember, each Thursday night in May, 7 p.m., we'll be doing this and talking about mental health. And so we want to thank you for being a part of our community tonight, and we so appreciate you. And if there's any information you would like, feel free to drop us an email at information@mccallcollege.org, information@mccallcollege.org. And if you're wanting more information about the series, we'll try and get that up and running on www.mccallcollege.org. And so until we meet again, we invite you back next week for more community conversations on topics of interest to our community.